right, welcome to this week's Culture Couch Live. We've got Mark and Gerard. How are you, gents?
Going well, thanks, Roosy. Going very well. Nice to see you again, Jez.
Roosy, Mark, how's things?
Excellent. Going very, very well. Now, we did a bit of a Culture Couch Live. I don't know if it was the last one or the one before about just leading different generations. So we got a lot of feedback on that. There's a lot of interest around that. So we thought we'd go to the data, which has just recently come out, and just pick one of the generations, guys, which is Gen Z, which is born from 1995 to 2009. I guess predominantly because they're either sort of coming into the workforce or, up to 30. You're probably still in more, not always, but it's probably still in more junior positions, So they're the ones that typically, need to be managed and taught and coached and all that sort of stuff. So we thought we'd sort of dissect that. And what I like about this, there's a bit of a theme, because Jez has got his hat on backwards, and I reckon that there's a bit of, before we get started, there's a bit of Gen Z about that, Murph, is that, and I'm trying to look on the data doesn't actually say Gen Z's wear their hats backwards, but I might open up with you. Is there a bit of Gen Z about that?
Well, no, I just figured that I need to connect. So you find you've got to find a way to connect somehow, Roosy, and if wearing my hat backwards is a good way, well then why not?
I love it. I couldn't have asked for anything better. I didn't say anything before we got on Culture Cast Live, but when we came up with the Gen Zers, I was so happy. So there's the first tip, everyone. Connect. Jez has made, what are we, Jez? Baby boomers. What are we? Baby boomers.
I think I'm a Gen X. I think by definition, I'm a baby boomer, but I've gone through and read a lot about it in the last few weeks, and I think I'm probably more of a Gen X, I reckon.
All right, okay.
Can I change my category?
I did ban hats backwards at training at Sydney and Melbourne, I'd say that.
Wow.
So Mark, let me go to you first. So leading that next generation of people coming into the workforce, or as I said, they're up to about 29, 30. What sort of jumped off the page in terms of the research for you?
Yeah, and probably worth referencing McCrindle is where we're getting the research from, and they've identified all age groups or all generations, I suppose, and what they expect of their leaders and how they behave really in a workplace. But the big one for me, Roosy, is probably around words they use to describe themselves: independent, determined, and creative. Independent. It's we're trying to build teams here, but there is that notion of independence, and whether that's because there's a lot more screens involved, whether it's a lot more social media. I grew up playing computer games on a couch with my mates, and that's the only way you could play it. Whereas now, this generation of high-speed internet, they can sit at home and be very independent, and it's almost this notion of be yourself and be authentic is kind of promoted this independence. And again, when you start to think about how you build a team around that, that's probably a really, really big one. That's 51% of Gen Z identify themselves as independent, which I think is a strong quality. But again, as a leader, we need to really think about how that plays out in a team-based atmosphere. And then the other one there is probably creative. Creativity, I think, is amazing. But again, from a generation that's come before, creativity probably wasn't embraced as much, and it's probably a little bit foreign to some of the senior and C-suite leaders that exist in the workplace these days.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's interesting, Murph, and you and I mean, I played Pong. Pong was that one with it going up and down and the ball coming across. Point being, I mean, it's a relatively large gap. We had Pac-Man as well, where that thing was eating stuff, and then the pinball machines, Murphs, which I was pretty good at pinball machines. So what about yourself? So what are some of the things, I mean, you've worked generations now in the leadership space. What about from a practical point of view? What marries up to you when you look at, because we can always take data and depends on the questions, but from a practical point of view, what do you see when you look at the data that you see in the workplace that best correlates?
Yeah, well, we've got 3 kids who sit in the Gen Z space, and obviously we work in sport, and so most of the or a lot of the teams that we work with would sit in that Gen Z space.
Yep.
I think the biggest thing as leaders in the in the workplace is the way that we communicate, or the
Yeah.
differences in the communication. So if I'm sitting at home at dinner with the family and a phone rings, they all know it's mine, because the
Yeah.
kids just don't have, and the guys at the club and same in the workplace, they don't have their phones on, like they communicate via text a lot.
Yeah. Yep.
Or in other sort of what we would call sort of silent modes. And I
Yep.
think the implication for that, we had this conversation with a client yesterday in a workshop. The implication of that is quite significant in terms of managing the expectations of clients and fellow workmates from
Yep.
different generations. So I think there's probably the thing that stands out for me most is working with Gen Z people, to employees, teammates, whatever we call them, working with them to understand, how do I communicate best with you, and what do we need to do to help you understand how others, teammates or clients, need to be communicated with, because
Yep.
not everybody wants to get a text message in response to a work inquiry. So
Yep.
I think that's the critical piece for me is if you go to Mark's point about creativity and being authentic and independence, that doesn't always align with team. And so if we are going to work in teams where we're dependent on each other for communication and output, how do we set up communication channels that are going to get the best out of everybody and allow us to do our work most effectively? So I think for me, that's what it comes back to. And I'm continually chatting with the kids about, how do we do this? What do you expect of me? And I put my hand up. I get it wrong. I get it wrong so many times, but I have to be prepared to say, hey, I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry, Trin. I don't think I've got that right. Can we talk through this, or can we text through this, whatever it is, but how do we resolve this issue? It's a long answer to a short question.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the other thing for me is the qualities they're looking for in a leader, which you said, Merv. One of those qualities they're looking for is clear communication. And I'll go through the other two, Mark, before I ask you this next question. Approachable. They want an approachable leader. They want a clear communicator, and they want empathy. But to Merv's point, I guess, what is clear communication to your generation compared to their generation? Like for me and Merv, like Merv will ring me, and if I can't pick up, we very rarely text each other backwards and forwards, do we, Merv? We normally, if you ring me and I'm on the phone, I'll text him back and say, mate, I'll give you a call back. We very rarely communicate by text. So that's a really interesting point. Whilst they want clear communication, what you spoke about before we got on and what Merv just spoke, what is clear communication? Because then we've got to define the behaviours anyway under clear communication, don't we?
Yeah, I think you've almost answered your own question there, Roosy, in respect to, and great point, Jez, around clear communication. And we hear that so often in session. And our question always is, what does clear communication look like? What does that look like to you as an individual? And the ability to have that conversation, people start to realise that their version of clear communication or their medium of communication is very different to somebody else. But again, it's all about having that conversation. So to your point, Roosy, if you look at approachable, clear communication and empathy, what does an approachable leader look like? Well, an approachable leader looks like someone who shows care, someone who shows attention, someone who asks questions, takes time, and that essentially is rolled up into that word called empathy. And then clear communication, again, you find out what communication preference somebody has through asking questions and being an empathetic leader and starting to understand. Because some generations too, generations are great because it sort of buckets everyone into a behavioural framework itself. But don't fall back on that as a leader. You still got to ask the question, because there might be someone in Gen Z that loves chatting on the phone. Who knows? But unless you ask that question, unless you map it out, you're making assumptions which are, as we know, in a workplace are very dangerous and don't promote this culture of openness that we firmly believe is high performance.
But I think the point there is really interesting, because as a leader in the workplace, is it my job to change my behavior to cater for the people I'm leading, or is it their job to adapt to my style because I'm the leader? And I think that's the struggle that leaders in any sector are coming to terms with, because historically it's been the boss is the boss is the boss.
Yeah.
And that just isn't holding any water anymore. And the truth about it is, the further we go down the generations, and we've got or Generation Alpha coming. So the further we go down, the further away we're moving from that directive style of leadership. And I think probably, as I said, I've been doing a fair bit of research in the last few weeks into this for our clients. I think the more you research it, the more it becomes my responsibility to create an environment where I can communicate effectively and get the best out of my team, even though it wasn't the way that it's been done in the past. So
100%.
I'm glad you said that, Jez.
It's a really interesting challenge, and I think that's why I raise. I don't always talk about the kids, but learning from my children has absolutely helped me in the workplace.
Yeah, and for me as a coach, I mean, I've dealt with, we get them at 18 years of age, as you guys know. So you're 100% right. That ability to put yourself in their shoes. But equally, Murph, what you're saying is right. It's up to the leader, but you're going to be a bad leader. So if you're approachable, you're a clear communicator, and you've got empathy, no, you're going to be a good leader. So what we're talking to the leader about is really a leadership trait that we want anyway. So what the Gen Zers are after is something that all leaders should have anyway, because I reckon you made a good point, Mark. Yeah, we're generalizing a bit, and we just want to give some content, but really it's about not worrying too much about the generations. And I suppose that's my point there. It's if you're approachable and you've got clear communication and you've got good empathy, I reckon you're going to be a pretty good leader. I think the other one for me that stands out too is, because we had a discussion, I think, on Culture Cast Live about this battle for talent. So what's most important when considering a new job? Accessible and approachable leadership. But I think this keeps coming up, gents, is learning and development opportunities and career progression opportunities. Again, is that hard? If we should be, Mark, as any organisation, should be providing opportunity from our staff, shouldn't we?
Oh, absolutely. And that only benefits the business. If you employ good people, or people that are good at their job and have good character, you would want to continue to improve them. You want to give them the tools. You want to give them whatever they need. And again, that comes back to Jez's point. As a leader, you're of service, but you've got to ask the question about what they need, and then you've got to adapt, whether your leadership style, your communication, the tools you provide, resources, whatever it is. You first got to ask the question, and then you've got to build a plan around what that looks like to get the best out of your team. And that's really, it doesn't matter what generation it is, as you said, Roosy, those qualities of a leader stand around the generation, but use the generations as your baseline to kind of understand and generate some self-awareness, and then adapt and connect using leadership traits or leadership qualities.
I reckon, Murph, the one for me too is, because when you and I started work, like I didn't give one thought to enjoying my job. I literally
What year was this?
This was in 19. You guys know I put the AMP on the map back in 1980, 81. But Murph, I didn't give one thought to enjoying my job. And the reason I say that is because one of the top fears of the Gen Z is being stuck in a job that I don't enjoy and find fulfillment in. So again, that's something that we should provide anyway. But I think that's a big difference, isn't it, Murph? Like, I don't know what you were like. I was like, okay, there's a job. It's at the AMP. I'm going to go and work. And admittedly, my number one passion was to play footy. So that's, so there's a bit of a balance there. But not one part of me said, am I going to fulfill me? All I cared about was doing something during the day, getting a paycheck so I could get to Fitzroy Footy Club training. But I suspect there's a bit of that. If I look at my dad, he went to the T&G every day for 40 years, and it only changed because it got bought out by, I think it was CGU. So that's a bit of a difference too. Again, it's not a bad thing, but it's something that as the generations of leaders have to look down, go, we've got to provide a fulfilling environment for these new people coming in the workplace.
Yeah, particularly in a difficult employment market where it is hard to find good staff due to low unemployment.
Yep.
And the fact that Gen Z employees move more easily, as you say, because they're looking for. So if it's really important to understand what they're looking for so that we can start to cater for it. Now, it doesn't mean to say you're going to be able to retain everybody, but we all know the cost of employing new people, training them, and then just having them leave. It's a huge cost to business. So understanding that and saying, what do you need from the workplace? How can I support you in that? What can I do? How do you want to be committed? Like, I'll keep coming back to, I think in the, if you're looking at the percentages in the workforce, Gen Z is the highest percentage in the workforce at the minute.
Yeah.
And so it's saying it's 34%, Gen Y, and 20, is it 27? But it's
27 is Gen Z. Yep.
Yeah. So the Gen X and the baby boomers are on the decline. The others are on the incline. We have to be able to adapt as leaders. We have to be able to adapt.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a good way to finish, Murph. But I think we're sort of all, whilst we've articulated this specific generation, what gives me, not that I didn't have hope, but what gives me hope is they're such achievable goals. It's like whatever those things we've spoken about, gents, if you're a leader that's, got empathy, has got good accountability, the way you communicate, and equally you're providing a really good, inclusive, fulfilling workplace. Wow. I mean, what a place to work for anyway. I mean, I think it's all good, but hopefully that gives you an idea of just sort of dissecting some of that information. So very, very good conversation, gentlemen.
I wanted to pick up a couple of points outside Gen Z though, Roosy.
Yep.
I did notice that the preferred car of the baby boomer was a Ford Mustang.
Yes,
that's midlife crisis stuff, isn't it?
What car did you used to drive before what was your last car when you were here?
I actually, because that's a great point. I did have a Ford Mustang, and I did notice that the favourite car for the builders was a Model T Ford, which was your first car.
Harsh, very harsh.
Well played.
Very good, gents. No, I did have a Ford Mustang. Very good car. I love the very iconic car, the Ford Mustang, with convertible too, I might add, which goes with your hat. So you would look good with a hat driving down.
I'm about to head down to the skate park. So,
no, good conversation, gents. All right, thanks a lot. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Murph. And we'll see everyone next week on the Culture Couch Live.